50 AM and Express 106.5 FM.
Solid Foundations. I'm your host, Steve Matley. We come to you every week on KCAA, NBC affiliate in the Los Angeles area, covering all of Southern California. If you miss us live, don't forget to check out the streaming broadcast. We're on the Building Solid Foundations channel, which is a free channel to download on Roku, Amazon Fire, or the Android app. Or you can catch us on any of a couple dozen podcast platforms, and we show up on YouTube as well. So welcome to Building Solid Foundations. Today we're going to be talking about biotech and pharmaceuticals with Nigel Beeley. He is a research scientist. He came from the University of Liverpool in the United Kingdom, got his PhD at University of Manchester, United Kingdom, which tells me he must have had to have a very careful selection in which football team he rooted for, as I believe those are very, very fierce rivals, are they not?
Manchester United.
Yes, Manchester and Liverpool are pretty much, yeah, exactly.
My team is Manchester United.
Okay, Manchester United, not Manchester City, which is a different team also.
Oh,
And you don't want to wear that wrong shirt in the wrong pub either. So, so he has spent 2 years as Royal Society Overseas Research Fellow in Zurich, Switzerland. He has co-authored over 70 scientific publications and abstracts. He is the co-inventor on over 120 patent applications, including 73 issued U.S. patents, which is a lot. And you've had a long and illustrious career in the biopharmaceutical world. Welcome. And one more thing I didn't mention is Nigel is on the board of WCTE. WCTE is a company founded by Wes Chandler, a former NFL football player. He's a Hall of Famer, and he started this in his retirement to help himself and his fellow former players who were battling with the effects of CTE and traumatic brain injury. And it's helping not just them, but other victims of traumatic brain injury. So I just want to throw that out there. We've had Wes on our broadcast in the past. If you missed that, go back in our archives and check that. So welcome, Nigel. It's great to have you on Building Solid Foundations. So tell us a little bit. The world you're in is, I would say, obviously highly scientific, a lot of chemistry. What leads you into going into that path in your life, going into the biopharmaceutical world?
What led me into that path? Just when I was a teenager, I wasn't particularly interested in academic science, although I was good at it. I could do it. In fact, I was more interested in playing the guitar in a rock band.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't until I got to the University of Liverpool at would have been age 18, that I began to not only do well in the sciences, but also to clearly become interested and understand where things were going. And so it was the University of Liverpool really that changed me from an aspiring rock star to an aspiring scientific researcher.
Okay. And that's obviously very different because science, music is obviously an art, a very creative art, and chemistry is very much a science, a quantitative science. Those are very, very different. You would think that's two different people doing that.
Yeah, you can sit there and think, well, they're very, very different. Of course, musical skills come with, to some extent, scientific skills, and in addition, I think a lot of my time when I was playing the guitar was actually fixing, some amplifier, the electrics in an amplifier, getting the soldering iron out and joining wires together and all that kind of stuff, which is in fact what you might do if you were studying physics or physical chemistry.
That's right. Yeah, it's electrical engineering is what
So,
that is. Yes.
you know, the two things have connections,
Yeah.
right? They weren't that far distant from each other.
Right, and actually, music is mathematical. It's timing and beats and tempos, which are there's a lot of math in writing
Yeah,
music.
yeah,
So yeah,
that's correct.
yeah. So um, okay, so you went down that path. Now you work with WCTE. So how did you get involved with Wes working in that organization?
Yeah. So I have I worked as a consultant to a number of different companies for the past um, 13 years or so. And I'd been working with a couple of guys who I'd used to work with at a company called Arena Pharmaceuticals. And they were working on a medical marijuana company. This was a few years back. And At the end of 2018, uh, I went to a holiday cocktail party down in San Diego, and lo and behold, Wes Chandler was there. And I, started talking to him, and he was clearly interested in addressing concussion injuries and the long-term effects of concussion injuries. And it turns out that a fraction of marijuana extracts had been shown to be quite useful in traumatic brain injury. And so what had happened was you had some data coming in from car crash victims who had traumatic brain injury, and those who had uh, marijuana on board, or a fraction of the marijuana uh, chemicals on board called CBDs, um, fared better than those who didn't. And indeed, the recovery times of those who had marijuana on board were significantly shorter than those who didn't. And so Wes was interested in that, and we began a discussion and had a number of discussions about that. Um, but got to the point where, because of the way the NFL views marijuana, it was never going to be a solution. Uh, let's call it an on-field solution to the
Okay.
problem of concussion injuries. And so, Wes, I guess he must have liked some of the things I was saying. And so we went back to the drawing board and came up with an alternative pathway to having an on-field during the game solution to prevention or treatment of concussion injuries.
Okay.
So that's in a nutshell. That's how all that started back in at the end of 2018, and then we went quiet during the COVID situation, the COVID period, and then a couple of years ago uh, began to resurrect what we'd been talking about and thinking. And in that context, WCTE have filed a rather large patent, 150 pages of patent application uh, to cover a new approach to on-field protection and treatment of players.
Okay. So I assume this is something if a player receives a significant blow to the head on the field, maybe they're knocked out. The trainers, as they come out, could administer something right there while they're laying on the field before they are taken
Well,
off the study.
yeah, I don't want to go into a lot of details about that because that's
Okay,
the subject
that's
of the
part
patent.
of the okay. That's part of the
But
IP.
it's essentially the idea is to provide the players with on-field protection
Okay,
from concussion injuries.
interesting. Okay, and it's not just obviously NFL. I mean that's the main point, but This, as you mentioned, car crash victims, victims PTSD from military, other sports. There's a lot of people that are on the job injuries can all result in traumatic brain injury and create similar
Yes.
things. So this is an application that could help all those people.
Absolutely. And so, we think it can help the world of ice hockey, soccer. You mentioned PTSD. There's a whole range of people other than NFL players who this potential product and treatment can help. I think the other element in the story, of course, is the statistics on former NFL players who have the consequences of multiple concussion injuries as a problem. And the consequences of multiple concussion injuries are called CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And, if you look at the statistics, there was a recent article in USA Today, greater than 97% of former players have some form of CTE. And CTE manifests itself as you get older as dementia. The symptoms can be similar to dementia, to Alzheimer's, to Parkinson's. And so that's a real serious problem. If you're fine, if you get Alzheimer's and you're 90, that's okay, I guess. But if you get Alzheimer's and you're 40, that's a real serious problem. And so anything that can be done to, one, address concussion injuries as they happen, and then two, to address them as time progresses, is of immense value to the NFL players. Now, it should be said that you look at the world of soccer and rugby and what have you, the number of former players who have CTE is much smaller than those from the NFL. And so in the NFL, it's 97% of former players. In soccer, is probably of the order of 10 or 15% or something like that. It's still a serious number, of course, because soccer is one of the worldwide,
A lot of
the
people
largest
involved.
sports worldwide.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Nigel Beeley. He is a research scientist in the pharmaceutical realm, and he is working with WCTE on solutions to CTE and traumatic brain injury. This is Building Solid Foundations. I'm your host, Steve Matley. We'll be right back after this.
Fire Up Connect is the most innovative business networking group, supporting and collaborating with a dozen of small businesses that are interested in building and establishing strong business connections, hosting educational live seminars while carrying out business and community-driven projects, as well as marketing programs as a part of its membership program. Fire Up Connect also offers virtual assistance with a wide range of services including inbound customer support, chat support, appointment setting and email management, graphic designing, video editing, web design and development, social media marketing, e-commerce solution, content writing and much more. For more information, head on over to www.fireupconnect.com. Fire Up Connect, helping success stories unfold every day.
Real men of real estate.
Men of Real Estate radio show here on KCAA.
Boats, mortgages can be purchased.
All of us want to live in thriving communities.
Basically, go to the radio station, KCAAradio.com.
You can find us on your dial at 102.3 FM, 1050 AM, as well as 106.5 FM.
Solid Foundations Radio.
Hi, this is Jim McLaughlin with Effective Action Consulting, and I've been a member of Fire Up Connect for, probably 3 years now. And what I really like about Fire Up Connect is the unique model that we go through, that we follow, the agenda, so to speak, in the meeting that really has us get engaged and involved with each other in the meetings. It's not that we're individuals, it's that we're all really working together to better ourselves, our businesses, and the community through the projects that we work on. So I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to network with people in this environment, and it's really impacted my business in a big way. So take a look.
Welcome back to Building Solid Foundations. I'm your host, Steve Matley. Today we are talking with Nigel Beeley. He is a biotech and pharmaceuticals scientist. He works with WCTE, which is former NFL player Wes Chandler's company that helps people who are victims of CTE and TBI to help improve, to help recover, to help recover some of their lifestyle back through dealing with the injury and to mitigate the symptoms. So Nigel, when we left off, we were talking about some of what you've done and the approaches that you had, and you also talked about the number of people that are suffering from CTE, and you mentioned 97% of former players of the NFL have some level, whereas maybe 15%, which is still a lot of people, in professional soccer. And my thinking there, okay, soccer is not a tackle and throw them down on the ground sport, but it is a very physical sport, and they don't wear helmets. And I had another guest on a while back, and we talked about if helmets were a help or a hindrance to this issue in the NFL, because Australia's rules football doesn't seem to have a highest level of CTE, and nor does rugby, and they seem much more violent than U.S. football. In your opinion, is the helmet part of the problem or part of the solution with this?
Well, I would say the helmet is part of the problem because on the one hand, the players who wear the helmet believe it's protecting them, and that may not be true. And then on the other hand, because the players believe that they're protected, they go into a head-on tackle, for example, without even thinking about the damage it might be doing. And so if you compare that, this is the NFL, if you compare that with soccer, for example, helmets are not worn. And then you can compare that with rugby, also pretty violent and aggressive sport, and head protection is limited.
Right.
And so that's one aspect. Another aspect of the whole concussion injury story is that it isn't simply about protecting the head from a fractured skull. It's just as much about protecting the brain in the skull from undue movement, if you like, which doesn't really have any, which the helmet doesn't really protect you from that. But nevertheless, the helmet encourages the players, I think, to do a significant amount of undue movement of the head. My opinion on that is subjective. I'm not going to show you scientific evidence of one way or the other, but I personally think the helmet is a problem in the game.
Yeah, and I always thought that myself. Again, I'm just adding, my own opinion as I watch these things. And I see, so in football, because they wear the helmet, they use the head as a weapon, as a point of contact. Instead of just the hands and the elbows and those things, they're actually using the head as the attack weapon. they're taught, defensive players are taught to try and get their helmet onto the ball to pop it loose and create a fumble. They're taught to lead with the head, not into the other player's head, but lead with their head into the ball, which is trying to dislodge a pretty firmly stuck ball with a pretty buff player and lodge that. That's going to create an impact. And I think they probably wouldn't do that if they didn't have a helmet. They'd be using their hands or something else to try and do that move. And I noticed that, like rugby players, I have a nephew who plays rugby. They don't wear helmets. They are a very, very aggressive, very violent sport, but they learn how to make their moves and protect their head. They learn how to move the head off to the side and use the shoulders, use the elbows, use their chest, use other parts of their body to get the other player down or to move, get the ball down the field. And I've always suspected that maybe the helmet did more harm than good. And I think also neck injuries, which is different than CTE, but I think neck injuries come from that as well. If you're smacking your head first, you're going to put pressure on your neck, almost get kind of that Christopher Reeves injury. So I always wondered if helmets were a prudent safety measure for football, or if they just need to kind of rethink how they play the game and train the players to keep your head out of the play.
Well, again, you compare American football with rugby. There are some significant similarities in the game, except of course the rugby players are not wearing helmets and the NFL guys are. And so you can play the game in a different way. As you said, rugby players seem to learn how to protect the head when they're doing whatever they're doing. Whereas the NFL guys don't seem to think about that.
Right. And it's not just the NFL, because the football practice at the college level, at the high school level, at the youth level. Years ago, I used to do officiating of football, high school level football, and that meant you also officiated youth sports too. And I remember a young kid, I would say he was probably a 8-9-year-old kid is my guess, playing for one of the teams. He was a defensive player, runs up, used his head to lead to tackle another kid, and ended up with an injury that stopped the game for 25 minutes while we had to call an ambulance, and the kid had a severe neck injury out of the deal. But again, he went head first into the other player. Now they used to call that spearing. Now they have targeting is what they call it now. But they used to be called spearing, and it's a penalty, but it wasn't enforced that much. And it was kind of just all the players used their head as a weapon. And I remember that and thinking to myself, there's something wrong with the way they're playing this thing, and something wrong with the way they're coached. No kid should ever have a risk of paralysis or that kind of injury at that age, just trying to play a game, just trying to get some exercise.
Well, I would think the other thing that's happened in recent years is that for parents, the prospect of having their kids injured in playing football has encouraged parents to say, well, you're not going to do that. You're not playing.
Right.
You're going to play. You're going to do something that's less likely to cause you injury.
Basketball or swimming or tennis or something like that. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, it's not just the protect the skull. It's not a matter of obviously we don't want the skull to crack, but even if the skull stays intact and there's no you don't get a bump on the head, you don't split the skull or break the skin or anything. Inside, the brain is sitting in its little, I guess, gelatinous world in there with its fluid around it. And when the head moves and then suddenly stops, just like in your car, when you're in the car and it suddenly stops, you get thrown against the steering wheel, the dashboard, the seat in front of you. Your brain gets thrown against the inside of the skull, which can cause injury. That's my understanding of how that works. And that itself can create a brain injury, even though the skull itself was protected. Is that a fair analysis of
Yeah,
that?
yeah. That's a fair analysis of that. But I do think that that the prospect of those kinds of injuries is enhanced when you're wearing a helmet because you think you're protected, right? If you're not
Right.
wearing a helmet, you're there's some compensatory mechanisms that your body puts in place that reduce the impact of those kinds of motions and movements.
Oh yeah, your body naturally is going to flinch away from direct head contact.
Yeah.
We're gonna take another short break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Nigel Bealey. He is a biotech and pharmaceuticals scientist working with WCTE, and he's working on a current patent for helping NFL players that are dealing with CTE and traumatic brain injury. This is Building Solid Foundations. We'll be right back after this.
FireUp Connect is the most innovative business networking group, supporting and collaborating with a dozen of small businesses that are interested in building and establishing strong business connections, hosting educational live seminars while carrying out business and community-driven projects, as well as marketing programs as a part of its membership program. FireUp Connect also offers virtual assistance with a wide range of services including inbound customer support, chat support, appointment setting and email management, graphic designing, video editing, web design and development, social media marketing, e-commerce solution, content writing and much more. For more information, head on over to www.fireupconnect.com. FireUp Connect, helping success stories unfold every day.
Real men of real estate.
Men of Real Estate radio show here on KCAA.
Boats, mortgages can be purchased.
All of us want to live in thriving communities.
Basically, go to the radio station KCAA radio.com.
You can find us on your dial at 102.3 FM, 1050 AM, as well as 106.5 FM.
Foundations Radio.
Hi, this is Jim McLaughlin with Effective Action Consulting, and I've been a member of FireUp Connect for, probably 3 years now. And what I really like about FireUp Connect is the unique model that we go through, that we follow, the agenda, so to speak, in the meeting that really has us get engaged and involved with each other in the meetings. It's not that we're individuals, it's that we're all really working together to better ourselves, our businesses, and the community through the projects that we work on. So I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to network with people in this environment, and it's really impacted my business in a big way. So take a look.
Welcome back to Building Solid Foundations. I'm your host, Steve Matley. Today we're talking to Nigel Bealey. He is on the board of WCTE, which is an organization started by Wes Chandler, former NFL Pro Bowler, I believe. And he is working in the biotech and pharmaceutical side of things to help provide solutions for players and former players that are dealing with CTE and traumatic brain injury. So Nigel, you're with WCT. I know you're on the board, so you're there with Wes and the other leaders that are on the board. And by the way, for the listeners out there, full disclosure, I am a shareholder in WCTE. I'm an early shareholder because I believe in what they do. I believe in the mission that they have, and I believe they're trying to help people that desperately need help who are dealing with brain problems. So having said, I just want to throw that out there just so people know that I do have a minor connection to it. I'm not on the board. So Nigel, you're on the board, and you know the other initiatives they have going on. You've mentioned the patent that's in the works for the on-field treatment, but what else is WCTE doing to help current and former players?
Yeah, so WCT really is prepared to look at a number of approaches to treating concussion injuries and treating CTE. And to give you an example, they've been involved with a company a little company that began life as a company called Mindset. A Mindset have some interesting technology that's come about mainly from mobile phone technologies, where you can use microwaves to basically reset some of the proteins in the brain and correct certain brain damage that may have occurred. A mindset is that approach has been very, very successful in treating autism, for example, which has almost no treatment available. And they have recently acquired a contract with an organization called DARPA, who are part of the military, to treat PTSD with microwaves. And so they have like a headset you put on your head. The microwaves are tuned and adjusted, and then some measurements are taken, and they have the guy who put the thing together has written a computer program to analyze all the details. And so you go through a series of treatments with that, and hopefully come out with your brain rewired.
Interesting. So is it actually reconnecting synapses? Is that what it's doing?
It's not clear exactly what it's doing.
Okay.
It's certainly having an impact on the brain proteins, because microwaves do have an impact on brain proteins. So every time you use your mobile phone, you've got some microwaves going through your head.
Oh yeah, they always tell you don't hang around an open microwave oven, and don't keep your phone up to your head. Use a set of earphones instead, and they tell you those things because they say that those microwave signals can do damage to your brain.
Yeah. But of course, that's a fundamental tenet in the world of pharmaceuticals and biotech, and that almost everything that we do can cause damage if used inappropriately or in excess. But if you get the amounts right, and in this case, it's the amount of microwave radiation that you need to get right, then it can be beneficial.
Right.
So WCT has an interest in that. We've also spent a lot of time looking at things like stem cells. It turns out that stem cells appear not to be particularly useful for concussion injuries, but are useful for muscle and broken bones and things like that. And the classic example of that in recent years has been Gronkowski,
Yes.
who retired and then decided he was going to do a comeback. And you can watch him on a YouTube talking about this. And he had a sequence of stem cell treatments, and then came back, and with Tom Brady won the Super Bowl for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Right.
So we're interested in all of that stuff, and we've looked at a lot of that in some detail.
Okay, and obviously that the brain itself, the body has to be healthy too. So the stem cells can help repair a lot of the body, which may not directly affect the brain, but affects everything.
You can say the body needs to be healthy, but in actual fact, if you look at Lou Gehrig's disease or ALS, the brain is functioning wonderfully well, and it's the body that's failing.
Right.
You take an example like Stephen Hawking, who I'm sure you've heard of. I mean, basically, he couldn't do anything other than twitch his nose so that he got a computer to talk for him and stuff. But his brain was working phenomenally well.
Right, right.
So, obviously there is a body-brain connection for some things, but there are plenty of examples out there where the brain is working wonderfully well, but the body is failing.
Yeah. And honestly, if I given the choice, I think I'd rather do the Alzheimer's than the Lou Gehrig's, saying that in the fact that with Lou Gehrig's, you are perfectly healthy, rational, you're thinking, and you're a prisoner of your body. It won't do anything you ask it to do. Whereas in on the Alzheimer's, the opposite. It's hard on everybody around you, but you yourself have no idea what's going on. So one's harder on you and one's harder on everybody around you that's trying to take care of you. So, but either one of those are not something we hopefully will find cures for both of those. So you mentioned several things that they're doing that are phenomenal. This microwave technology that they're doing. And as you mentioned, every cure can also be a poison, just like every food. Every food we eat could also be a poison if we abused it, overused it, those kind of things. And that's kind of the nature of the world. But if you do the correct dosage, the correct amount, the correct calibrations, it can actually undo damage. So for people, so there's another thing coming up. There's the football injuries and there's the traumatic brain injury. We mentioned the cell phone use. Do you think that in the fairly near future, we're going to see kind of the same level of brain damage caused by all the people with the cell phones and the wearable Bluetooth technology and all those things?
Well, I think the source of microwaves and in cell phones is within the actual cell phone, and so anyone who wears headphones is not going to be subjected to the same level of exposure to microwaves, and anyone who wears AirPods or AirBuds or whatever the latest thing is. There's no exposure to microwaves.
Okay, they're using a different technology to connect.
It's only when you put the actual, you pick your phone up and you put it right next to your ear. That's right. When you're exposed to the microwaves. And I think cell phones have been around long enough that you might have thought there were people who clearly had some sort of brain damage from using a microwave device such as a cell phone, but in reality I don't think there are. You don't see or hear a lot about that.
Interesting.
And so in just the same way as there was a time when people talked about power lines. And power lines, of course, are also a source of microwaves.
Right. And
how a power line can damage you as an individual, but you don't hear much about that anymore. It seems to have the data doesn't support it.
Or don't sit too close to the television. I remember that when I was a kid too, because it was gonna mess you up. All right, we're gonna take another short break. When we come back, we're gonna wrap up our conversation with Nigel Beeley. He is a biotech and pharmaceuticals scientist, and he is on the board of WCTE. This is Steve Matley, Building Solid Foundations. We'll be right back after this.
Fire Up Connect is the most innovative business networking group, supporting and collaborating with a dozen of small businesses that are interested in building and establishing strong business connections, hosting educational live seminars while carrying out business and community-driven projects, as well as marketing programs as a part of its membership program. Fire Up Connect also offers virtual assistance with a wide range of services including inbound customer support, chat support, appointment setting and email management, graphic designing, video editing, web design and development, social media marketing, e-commerce solution, content writing and much more. For more information, head on over to www.fireupconnect.com. Fire Up Connect, helping success stories unfold every day.
of real estate.
Men of Real Estate radio show here on KCAA.
Boats, mortgages can be purchased.
All of us want to live in thriving communities.
Basically, go to the radio station KCAA radio.com.
You can find us on your dial at 102.3 FM, 1050 AM, as well as 106.5 FM.
Solid Foundations Radio.
Hi, this is Jim McLaughlin with Effective Action Consulting, and I've been a member of Fire Up Connect for, probably 3 years now. And what I really like about Fire Up Connect is the unique model that we go through, that we follow, the agenda, so to speak, in the meeting that really has us get engaged and involved with each other in the meetings. It's not that we're individuals, it's that we're all really working together to better ourselves, our businesses, and the community through the projects that we work on. So I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to network with people in this environment, and it's really impacted my business in a big way. So take a look.
Welcome back to Building Solid Foundations. This is Steve Matley, your host. We are talking with Nigel Beeley. He is a biotech and pharmaceuticals research scientist, and he is a board member of WCTE, which is a corporation that provides biopharmaceuticals, behavioral therapy, and other measures to help victims of traumatic brain injury and CTE. That company was originally founded by Wes Chandler of NFL fame as an effort to help not just himself, but all of his fellow players and others outside of the athletic world who are dealing with issues of traumatic brain injury. So, Nigel, as we kind of wrap up the conversation, I want to kind of make a loop back around. You mentioned first meeting Wes here in San Diego, and then working with several different ways of potentially creating on-field treatment. And you mentioned the CBD aspect, and we kind of talked about why the NFL didn't want to adapt that, which is obvious because the players couldn't pass their drug tests. That's a standard they have. They can't have that in their system. But is that also a viable, a viable basis for potential cures for things like TBI, Alzheimer's, Lou Gehrig's, other kind of brain problems?
I think that one of the important things to understand about CTE is that in the mature patient, if you like, the symptoms resemble Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease or dementia, but the actual problem is not Alzheimer's. And so Alzheimer's is quite specific brain problem, and CTE is not Alzheimer's, even though the symptoms resemble Alzheimer's. And so whatever works for CTE isn't necessarily going to work for Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or some more general dementia, because of, I think, the way people have understood CTE so far. You still can't really diagnose CTE unless the patient dies and you're able to look at the brain post-mortem. That's the only reliable way you can diagnose CTE today. That may change, and I'm sure that will change, but it's not like Alzheimer's, where you have some brain and blood markers you can look at, or Parkinson's, where you have the same. And so going back to any therapy that works for CTE, it isn't necessarily going to be a treatment for Alzheimer's or Parkinson's.
Okay, but it potentially could help victims of CTE. It's interesting you said that you can't really diagnose CTE until pretty much after the patient's dead. I remember, because I work in, my background is in land development and those type of things. And I remember there was a certain rat that was an endangered species. It was a type of a kangaroo rat, but it was only one specific type of the kangaroo rat, one specific little species. But the only way to know if the rat that you were trying to save was endangered, which could potentially stop a whole development, was to kill the rat and biopsy it. And so the only way to know if you were going to save the rat was to kill the rat to make sure that was the kind of rat you wanted to save. And it kind of sounds the same thing. The only way to diagnose if someone's got the CTE is after they're dead, and you look at the brain, and then you know if they had CTE.
Well, that's the official diagnosis.
Right. So you have to look at other symptoms and kind of deduce.
Obviously, there are behavioral traits.
Right.
Because the guy is showing symptoms that look like Alzheimer's or look like Parkinson's, for example.
Right, but you could rule those out,
and you can see those very clearly. Yeah. But the true CTE diagnosis only comes post-mortem. Right.
That's fascinating. And then, but again, as you said, you figure out, you deduce it by looking at symptoms and ruling out the other things that would cause those symptoms and say it must be this, and then try to treat that. So
yeah,
for all the progress we made in medicine and technology and science, we are still very much, I would say, very much naive about how the human body really works and all the things that affect it and how we can try to fix things that go wrong. It's so complicated, and the top scientists in the world haven't figured out a lot of it yet.
Yeah, it is extraordinarily complicated, and I think if you look at you look at the Human Genome Project, for example. There's still, half of the gene sequences that have been fished out from the Human Genome Project, people still don't know what they do or what they're supposed to be doing. And if you think about, the complexity of an animal, including humans, you have the gene sequence level, you have DNA sequence level, you have the messenger RNA sequence level, you have the protein that's encoded by the messenger RNA, and then you have how all of that fits together in a cellular structure, and then you have the world of lipids. You've probably got 1,000 different lipids and fats that are functioning in your body. And then you have the world of carbohydrates, glycobiology. And current thinking about glycobiology is that each cell is coated with sugar residues that are like a barcode that are telling the cell where to go. So the cell drops into the blood circulation and what have you. And the glycosylation patterns on the surface represent a barcode telling the cell where to go. Most of that is poorly understood.
It's very complicated.
Poorly understood.
Yeah, the human animal is the most complex machine we've ever seen, and we're very much behind whoever or whatever created it. So in our technologies, I want to thank you, Nigel. If you want to get hold of Nigel and ask him questions about this, if he's piqued any interest in this, Nigel at WCTE.inc. Nigel at WCTEinc.org, excuse me. Nigel at WCTEinc.org. That's also the website for WCTE if you want to find out what they're doing and the good they're doing out there helping people that are suffering from CTE and from traumatic brain injury. Nigel, I want to thank you for being on Building Solid Foundations. It's a fascinating conversation. It's a little above my scientific knowledge, but I find it utterly fascinating and interesting. So thank you for spending your time with us. And for the listeners out there, don't forget to check us every week on KCAA or live on one of our streaming platforms on Roku, Amazon Fire, or Android. And this is Steve Matley on Building Solid Foundations. Until next week, go do something different.
Miss your favorite show? Download the podcast at KCAA